Pivoteers and Pioneers. Pivoteers 2.0, and it's still tech-enabled recovery in the age of social distancing. The theme today is Data-Driven Hudson Valley, how data can empower your Hudson Valley business. Our special guest today is Dr. Cynthia Marcello, a small business data specialist, and so much more. Welcome. And if we can go to the next slide, I'll say just a little bit about OpenHub. For everyone who doesn't know, OpenHub is a tech hub in the mid-Hudson Valley, serving Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties. And the mission of OpenHub is to bring everybody together to build a thriving, accessible, inclusive, equitable, tech-driven economy in the mid-Hudson Valley. What you're seeing is, on the left is a picture from our Newburgh Girls Can Code Club. It's an after-school program at the Newburgh Free Library. On the very right-hand side is from our hackathon from our last year's Hudson Valley Tech Fest. There's a slide in between these two.
Sorry about that.
Okay. We started Pivoteers and Pioneers, which is the previous iteration of this webisode series, as an exploratory investigation of a theme, which is Pivoteers, people who adapted with technology during the pandemic shutdown. This was in preparation for speakers for our annual Hudson Valley Tech Fest, which will be held in October, and yet there's so many variables happening. So we're hoping we're still holding it, and our hackathon, and these are here's a picture from last year, from the hackathon, from just the Tech Fest, people networking, and okay. The next slide will introduce Dr. Cynthia Marcello, who's a data specialist for small business and a data science engineer, and she'll tell more about who she is and what she's going to be doing here today. But one offering she had was that we would make the entire episode open for questions at any point. So don't hesitate to ask. There's two ways to ask a question. If you go to the participants tab at the bottom of the screen and you click on there and you look in the participants column in the bottom right hand corner, it will say, I think remarks or comments, or, oh, here's someone else to admit. Great. So you can raise your hand there, or you can just put your question in a chat column. So you don't have to wait until the end. You can ask a question at any time, which I think is great and exciting. So I'm ready to hand it off to Cynthia. Are you ready?
I am.
Thank you so much.
All right. So before we get into the PowerPoint and sharing all the great information tonight, I just want to welcome everyone this evening to our webisode. And we always like to get feedback from our group as to what their thoughts are. So I'm going to put up a poll just to get some ideas about where you are at with respect to your knowledge of customer segmentation. So you all should be able to see a poll on your screen at this point. And if you don't see it, just raise your hand and we will fix the technology situation. But we'll give you a few minutes to review the questions and answer, and then I'll share the results so we can see where everyone is at with respect to customer segmentation. And like I said, we'll give you a few minutes to read the questions and respond, and then we will share the results with everyone.
We need special polling music.
Yes, we do. Yes. I like that. So I think everyone probably has had a chance to respond to the poll. So let's share the results. Let's see what we have here. Voila. No responses. Is that possible?
Arnold said he cannot see the poll.
He
Maybe
couldn't.
it's the issue.
Okay, let me relaunch it. Sometimes that happens. Let me relaunch it. Okay. Technology sometimes does that. So
Can you see it now?
I hope so. Can everyone see it?
I think I'm seeing more of an administrator here.
The expert on that. Okay. So it looks like no one is able to see the poll.
That's well.
If that's the case, then I'll go ahead and end the polling. I don't want to be. I want to keep it up there if anyone can't see it. So,
Cynthia, what if you just ask the question and then people can put their answers in the chat?
That sounds wonderful. That sounds wonderful. Again, we're testing some new features here of Zoom. So, the first question that we wanted to know is whether or not you are familiar with customer segmentation, and do you use it for your business now, or if you use it in your work, maybe for your employer. We're trying to just gauge the understanding of customer segmentation and whether or not you're familiar with the term. So if you would just put that in the chat, that would be wonderful. Okay. All right. Okay, so it looks like we have a 50-50 split at this point. All right. Okay. So the whole idea is, as we're going through the presentation, if you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and then Shelley can kind of interrupt me and we can entertain those questions. I think it would be more important to do it that way. In this way, as we're in the process of going through the topic, we don't leave anything out. So why don't we go ahead and do that. Again, I'm Cynthia Marcello, and I am a data specialist, as Shelley said earlier, and tonight we're going to focus on how you can use your existing data to solve customer loyalty and spending behavior problems during the challenge of economic uncertainty. And as we all know, with the pandemic and everything that's going on right now, there is a lot of uncertainty, especially if you're a business owner or even an employee of a business owner who's experiencing some of the dynamics that we're seeing. So some of the problems experienced by small retailers are highlighted in a lot of the news that you'll see out there today. And one article that kind of caught my eye was from McKinsey.com, and you can see I have the link down there. But basically, there are certain sectors that are especially vulnerable to the problems that are, being presented with COVID. And what they found is that the vulnerable sectors employ a lot of the workers. So 20 million workers, are employed by these vulnerable sectors, and 12% of the business revenue is earned by those sectors. So that's why our economy isn't experiencing, what we're experiencing right now. Two particular areas that are, or sectors that are very much impacted is the retail and restaurant business. So if you think R&R, I'm highlighting retail tonight. If time allows, we might talk about some of the restaurants that I have spoken with locally who have some information to share. But basically, the retail trade has experienced the largest negative effect, 50%, and are vulnerable to closing. And you may have heard in your neighborhood or in your local area where you live and reside, a lot of businesses are having to face that decision. What do we do? Can we stay solvent? So stores are closing due to staffing problems, not being able to do sanitation, supply chain issues, lack of an e-commerce presence. They don't have an online storefront, so they can't pivot, as it were, to an online store presence. They may not have the financial wherewithal to stay in business and remain, sustainable over time, and or they may not understand what changes in customer behavior have occurred, and they may not know exactly what their customers are doing with how they're dealing with COVID. Maybe their customers have just disappeared. And this is where data can serve as a enabler to answer a lot of those questions, those unknowns, and allow the business owner to make effective decisions. So I do encourage at one point for you to look at maybe that article down the road. So some common questions that have been posed, businesses that are reopening and or struggling with the idea, do I close, do I change my business entirely, is, what can we do to find out what our customer value was before COVID? What about reopening? Does it warrant even going there? And a lot of times businesses have data that they could use to answer those questions, but they're not sure how to get at that data, or they don't know if that data is even relevant because maybe too much time has passed, or they perceive that too much time has passed. In the past, some businesses have voiced the idea that, well, we did marketing one way. We sent out a massive marketing campaign to our customers, and that's how we approach marketing. And we don't really know what to do now that COVID has kicked in. We don't even know how we should change our way of doing things. We don't know how to use that data to make those decisions. So that's another concern or consideration, and that's where data can come in and help in that case as well. In some cases, I've talked to small businesses, which when I had my consulting business, small businesses were my passion. They're the ones that I like to work with because they would have very critical questions about, am I able to survive as a small business? How can I take the little bit of budget that I have, maximize my spending, and get the best ROI? So that's another thing that, businesses have asked themselves, can I even reopen? How am I going to reach my customers now that, we're in a state of reopen based on the phase that we're in? And then other concerns I've heard, in just speaking with local businesses is, my customer base is gone. My competition has probably taken them over, or, I really don't know if I can reopen. How do I know that they're going to come back to me? How do I know that they, even though they were once loyal to me, how do I know they're going to come back? And, again, all valid questions and all questions that can be answered with data. So I want to talk about, and feel free, Shelley, if questions do come in, and if I miss them in the chat, just interrupt me and we can address those questions, because I'm sure there might be some input. But I'm sure you all have heard of KPIs, key performance indicators. And tonight I'm going to focus on one particular KPI called RFM, the recency, frequency, and monetary analysis, okay? And I'm going to actually show you how to do that in Excel. We promised you a template, and we're going to be sharing that with you. And one of the reasons that KPIs such as RFM are so relevant in the age of COVID is we need to know when our customer purchased from us last. So whether we had to close completely or we're about to reopen, we really need to know how fresh are these customers. Where are we as far as recency? How many visits have they made to our store or online? How many purchases have they made? Have they purchased recently? How engaged are they with our products or our contacts? So recency can also be measured by touch points with the customer in the online space. So how recent have they visited our website? How recent have they responded to a newsletter we sent out? So I'm going to present it in the terms of purchases, because we're focusing on one aspect of it. You definitely want to think about it in terms of recency and touch points with the customer. How fresh is that activity? Have we heard from them lately? Frequency is basically how often. How often does the customer purchase from us? How often do they visit our website? How often do they, place orders and or contact customer service? That's another one. So how engaged and how frequently are they engaged? Is it once a month, twice a month, 3 times a month? We need to be able to determine that. And then of course there's the monetary aspect. Their intent on spending is an important aspect of gauging the purchasing power of that customer. Very important. So using either the total amount spent and or the average order value rather. That's something that will give you a good indication as to whether or not they're at the higher end or the lower end. So some facts about customer behavior, which you may or may not know. The more recent the purchase, the more responsive the customer is to promotions. So they're highly likely to respond to a promotion you send out. The more frequently they buy, the more engaged and satisfied they are, because they're obviously happy with your product or service. And that is a metric, a KPI, that means that you're accomplishing a specific goal, which is keeping that customer loyal, keeping that customer happy. And then the last one is monetary value differentiates heavy spenders from low value purchasers. Now, this is not saying by any means that those that purchase small items are not valuable, right? If they do that often, you know what type of customer that is, and you would segment them accordingly. So basically what we're talking about when we get further in the presentation is grouping your customers based on like behaviors and putting them in logical groups so that you can meet their needs appropriately and you know, tailor your marketing and positioning of your product appropriately. So the analysis returns the KPI measurement. So I just showed you the KPIs, and so the analysis actually gives you that result, that segmentation. And 80% of your business, you probably know, comes from 20% of your customers. So, you know, when you focus on the customers that are, we'll call them sticky customers, because they're always there, always generating some type of activity with your organization, then, you know, you realize that you need to serve them in a certain way. So RFM is nothing different than organizing them into logical groups. But the key aspect, and especially with COVID, is over a specific time frame, okay? So tonight, when I show you the sample spreadsheet that we're going to be passing out to you, we're looking at a 6-month period. And ironically, we're going from January to June. So January 1 to June 30th. And we all know in 2020, that was a very interesting time, right? We saw things, and the economy saw a lot of things. So, and I'm going to explain why we're focusing on that particular time frame. Keep in mind, when you're working with RFM for your own purposes, you might focus quarter at a time. You might even focus on the last month. You have to determine the relevance, and we'll talk a little bit about that in our discussion as what's relevant time-wise for me. All right, so each customer receives a score in the R, F, and M factors. They get an identity, if you will. And the score is used for identifying which customers are likely to respond to different promotions. All right, promotions, keep in mind, are not just, you know, sales flyers. A promotion could be you reach out to them and you send them a coupon, or you reach out to them and you make them a, you know, an offer, buy one, get one free. It's a promotion of your organization for that customer. So promotions can have many different facets to them. The other thing to think about is return on investment. I know a lot of small businesses, at least the small businesses I worked with, their marketing dollars are slim at some times, you know, and they have to decide exactly how am I going to slice up my marketing dollars so that my spend maximizes, I'm maximizing my spend for all of those dollars spent. So I do see we have a question here from Arnold. Can this also aid in reducing customer acquisition costs? Absolutely. So you could do the inverse of this. You could say, given what I know about this type of customer, I can market accordingly. I can be very smart with how I use the dollars that I spend to acquire customers. Absolutely. So you want to get creative with this. You definitely want to get creative with this. The other thing to remember is that it informs product placement and merchandising. So if you have a retail store and you know your customer base, you're going to design the store around the customers and their behavior, their purchasing behavior, and or the dynamics that they bring to the table, their preference. Sometimes it's a matter of preference. And you have conversations with your customers and you know they prefer it a certain way. And that's conducive to them coming into your store more often. And it could be a website store. Remember, store is not just brick and mortar. It could be online. If they want the color purple, give them the color purple. No, don't do that. All right, so let me just jump back really quick. I apologize. I just moved us ahead here. The other thing you want to think about is cross-selling opportunities. And one of the things we won't be going into tonight, maybe in a future webinar, is market basket analysis, looking at things that they buy together, right? So in the future, we may focus on that, but you want to think about the products you sell and logical combinations of products, bundling things together, things that logically go together. So that's something else. And of course, targeted marketing programs. All right, so in RFM, this is an example of the resulting score. All right, so particular customer gets a 115. That's 1 for recency, 1 for frequency, and 5 for monetary. So a 1 is on the lower end of the scale. A 5 is on the higher end of the scale. Now, it just so happens that the span is 1 to 5 here. I'm going to talk about why my spreadsheet is only 1 to 3, okay, when we get there. So keep in mind that these customers were placed, they were assigned a 3-digit score between 111 and 555. A high score is a 5 and a low score is a 1. And of course, you repeat that process for the F factor and the M factor. Each customer is placed into the bin that they belong to based on their recency, frequency, and monetary score. All right. Yes. Let's see. Shelly has her. Shelly.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I was muted because of the dog in the background.
Absolutely.
No, Kara asked an interesting question, and it may be the time to answer it or not.
Yes, no, absolutely. Yes, I would love to answer that. So this does intersect with qualitative user research, absolutely. So we're talking about behavior, and when you're doing qualitative research with your customer base, obviously there is an aspect of their personal attributes that you attribute to them. So any qualitative user research could be bundled together, absolutely. And I would highly recommend it, because when we start quantifying everything, sometimes we forget about those other pieces. So whether it's psychological, sociological, all those other pieces, you definitely want to weave that in, most definitely. All right. Thank you for that, Shelly. I almost missed it. All right. So the raw data that you need for an RFM, it's not mysterious. It's almost fun. Look at this. You need the customer ID, the order date, and the total order amount. So that's not a lot of data, right? Now, it depends on how much data if you're working on 6 months worth, that potentially could be a lot. If you're a small business, maybe not so much. Tonight's example, the small business that I worked with, who, by the way, wants to remain anonymous, that was their choice. And keep in mind that their customer IDs and names are anonymized because that was their request. The order amounts are not anonymized because we wanted a real result, and the order dates are not anonymized. But you want to keep in mind that it's a very simple 4 fields that you need for this particular type of analysis. That will allow you to perform the necessary calculations that you need and put each customer in the group that they belong in, using an algorithm which I'm going to share with you. So how do you interpret this particular table? And again, I'm looking at, okay, here's another question. What about the burnout from customers when joining a shopping club or program that may give discounts? So and I want to make sure I understand the question. So they join a shopping club and
it was for me, but people go around with keychains full of from their grocery, from their pharmacy, and everybody wants you to sign up, and they get all this data from you, and then maybe they send you a coupon, or you're like, I don't know, do I really get anything out of this? And I was looking at the metrics that you were using to collect data. It's not that much, but they do need the customer ID. So I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm giving them this information. And I was just wondering if in your experience that at some time you can speak to what you can do that's more creative, or because our customers getting burnt out.
Right. So I understand what you mean. I have a keychain that, it jingles. It's got so many of those, if you go to ShopRite or you go to a store, what have you. So it's one of those things where whether you sign up for Netflix or you sign up with an account as a customer, you have to be assigned an ID. And that's how we keep track of you. So in the end, you kind of give up your your desire to maybe stay quiet and right. So I'm glad you brought that up, because if we know that our customers are behaving a certain way, we can avoid inundating them with marketing that perhaps they don't want, right? That they would find annoying. So for example, if I have a customer who buys a lot, so we'll use this first one here, purchased recently. They recently purchased, right? And let's say you want to get advertising from me, right? In other words, I would want to look at purchases often as the second dynamic to qualify them for sending out intrusive advertising. If there are 2 to 3 on the recency and the frequency, they're a safe bet for sending out intrusive advertising or frequent advertising, right? Because we have a pattern of data behavior over time that shows that they're happy with our product, they're happy with our service, and it's highly likely that they wouldn't mind getting those advertisements or those coupons or what have you. The big key is you always let them opt out of those newsletters and things like that. So if they choose to not get that information, you're recognizing that they're really not, wanting to receive that. However, it's almost to their disadvantage because they might miss out on those coupons. So I would venture to guess that they're going to want to get those advertisements. But you're right, you want to be really judicious with how you market and how you reach out to the customer without, frustrating them. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And this is why the data is so important, because you can make those decisions. You can also time the advertising so that it's done in a reasonable way, instead of being constantly advertising. I'm not going to name names, but there's some examples of companies that, because I purchased, they bombard you. Like you see their ads all over, they follow you, right? And that's an example where an incorrect inference is made that just because I purchased recently that I want all that stuff in my face. So that's a very, very good point. Do they purchase often and do they spend a lot? Now, some folks might say, well, I'm a small business and I really don't sell high-priced items, so they're not really going to spend a lot. But you're looking at your product base and it's relative to the rest of your products. So spending a lot could be they buy a lot of quantity of a small priced item, right? That's a volume sale. So that would get you wondering, okay, they're buying high on this little item. What are they using it for? Maybe I can help them by combining and bundling products. So you really don't want to just take the numbers and say, I get it, I'm going to action based on these numbers. You want to then think about, what do these numbers really mean, given my product, given my service, and given what I know about my customers. That's the other piece. So not all of your customers are going to be 555s. They spend a lot, they're recent, they're frequent, right? However, if you were to take one of these factors, like the R factor, and you took all of the 555s, or I'm sorry, all of the 5s on the R factor, you may choose to send them a special coupon to encourage another purchase, right? So you would take each factor individually to make certain decisions, and you would also take the total factor for a given customer to make decisions. So it's a vertical and a horizontal split that you're doing with this data and creating subsets. So are there any questions thus far based on what I just said? I'm hoping that all makes sense. It seems like we have a group here that has done some of this before, which is wonderful. So here's an example, and Shelley, just let me know if I miss anybody. Here's an example of a segmentation of customers. Now, the segment and what you call it is up to you as an organization. All right, this is an example that is used. So I might say my champions are customers that bought recently, buy often, and spend the most. They're going to be a 4 to a 5 on the R factor, a 4 to a 5 on the F, and a 4 to a 5 on the M, okay? You can call them whatever you like. Obviously, if you're marketing to these folks, you have some lingo that you use, you're our loyal customers and we call you, the ambassadors or something like that. So you would want to come up with a table or a matrix such as this so that you have an idea of that customer base, that customer group in your mind. Those that are promising, and again, I'm just jumping around here, They're recent shoppers, haven't spent much, but this is what they are on the R and the F and the M. You can see on the recency, they're high. Frequency and monetary, not so high. All right, so they would be like a 341, a 331, or I'm sorry, a 311, a 411. That's what they would be on that factor. All right, so you want to use these segments to identify your best, your loyal, your at-risk, and your lost customers. And your lost customers are those that have churned or those who are likely to churn. Likely to churn is your at-risk, and your lost are the ones who have churned. They have left you. So you definitely want to identify those. All right, so now we get into COVID-related behavior change, which we all know just by looking around the world that there definitely has been change in this world. And if you're a small business owner, what does that mean for you? What can you do to mitigate what you're seeing? So you would want to take, for example, and these are just customer segment transaction data using 2 different time frames and look at the before and after, right? So compare maybe from February, March, and April, and May, June, and July, and look at them side by side and say, you know, customer X was exhibiting this behavior. They were let's say a 444, and now they're a 111, you know, and again, I'm just using those numbers. What can we do to span that gap? What can we do to reach them? You may also have, as a small business, gone from a full in-store purchasing model to a full online purchasing model because you had to close your store. Maybe the PPP loans didn't come in, your staff was furloughed, and you had to go to an online store in a hurry. Some folks might find that this is, you know, it's very stressful, obviously, but they may forget that the data that they're collecting after that move or the data they collected prior can help facilitate decisions made on how they move out to that online purchasing model, right? You might start to see larger purchases of bulk items on a, you know, items such as toilet paper, right? We all saw that, or water or hand sanitizer, or, you know, you might start to see people buying lots of a certain item. So how do we respond to that change in purchasing behavior? Or some groups of customers looked at convenience. Well, I'm going to buy a lot of this because it may run out, and it's a convenience in the house, right? So gathering that data and looking at it will allow us to determine how can we analyze that behavior and compare it to who they were prior. The third is customizing messaging so that you bring a return back to the prior behavior. So customers that maybe change to a different type of behavior, you can reach out to them and message them. And, you know, I see that even now locally, you know, starting to open up our store, our hours are limited. We have limited staff, but, you know, provided you're wearing a mask and you're, you know, hand sanitizing, we would allow you to come in and, you know, do what you need to do in our store. So they're starting to make that migration. Same thing with the 1, 2, 3 customer segment. You want to use the data insights that you get from them and drive all your personalized messaging, making sure that you have a full understanding of who were these customers and why did they come to you in the beginning, and how can you reach back out to them and give them what they need. All right, so I want to put up, before I go into the next part of this, and I want to put up a poll that talks about COVID-related behavior. And so give me 1 second. We're going to try this. If it doesn't work, we're just going to do it like we did before. All right. I'm an optimist. You will find that. So it may take a second. Let me know if you can't see it. Shelly, you can give me the thumbs up or down. Okay. All right. So the question is basically, have you seen a change in customer behavior? And this might be in your own store, your own business, or just having witnessed it in you know, the public. And we'll give you a few minutes to, it's not a long question, but a very valuable one. So is everyone, I'm hoping everyone else can see the poll. Okay.
And you can use the chat column if you like to post an answer.
Yes, yes. All right, so we have one of three who have voted. We'll just give you a couple more seconds and okay, so we have a couple comments here. One, notice the margin, this comes from Arnold, notice the marginal change since over the last 3 months, interaction has been limited. Yeah, and the last 3 months has been kind of interesting because phase 1, 2, 3, 4 is kind of rolled out rather quickly. And Shelley, I see your comment here. People don't browse, they just come in to shop and buy what they came in for and leave. Exactly, especially in the age of COVID. They want to get in the store, limit interaction with people and get out. Absolutely. So having those convenience items placed is helpful.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to end the polling. I hope everyone got a chance, and I'm going to share the results. Hopefully you can see the results. So we have one who's not a business owner or employee of this type of business, which is perfectly fine. I think we can go off of our, what we've seen out there, and we've seen a variety of different things. So obviously the shutdown means a lot to different folks. All right, I'm going to jump over to a different screen. Are you all able to see my spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm going to start on the first tab. And again, we're going to be sharing this with you after the webisode, so no worries there. So we talked about the bare bones data that you need to be able to run the analysis. Is this clear? Is everyone able to see, or is it a little tiny?
It's a little small.
Is it? Okay.
It depends how you.
Okay, all right. Well, we can kick it up a notch.
I can make my screen bigger on my end.
Is that better? Is that, I just want to make sure everyone can, okay, awesome. Let me just make sure there's no questions here. All right. Okay, good, good. We have a positive thumbs up. Good. All right. So as I said before, you need the customer ID, the purchase date, and the purchase amount. Now I'm just going to refer to customer ID 1, again, anonymized at request of the business. Obviously, this customer has placed 2 orders, and you can see the purchase dates. One's in February, one's in May, and the dollar amounts are rather small, right? You would want to collapse those so that you have a total amount spent. All right. All right, we have someone on their way in, so I just let them in. So if I take just customer ID 1 and jump over to the RFM analysis, you'll see customer 1, I have combined this spending, all right? So you wanna have a combined spend, just that's the point I'm trying to make there. So you have a list of purchases that each customer has made over the time frame that you're looking at. So this long list here is a 6-month time frame, okay? I took that out of my database, whatever system I'm using to manage my transactional data. I put that in, a spreadsheet. I then make sure I collapse everything so that it is grouped by customer, so I get that total spend. And I then bring it over into my RFM right here. So I would have my customer ID, I would have the last order date by doing, and I'm going to show you how to do this in a second, and I would have the recency, frequency, and total spend. All right. Now, you're going to like this customer list. You notice I've been referring to customers by IDs. Well, I don't know who 1 is. I can, assume I know, but always have a little references to who customer 1 is, so that, I always have a sheet in my spreadsheet that just gives me a point of reference as I'm going through my data, so that I can see the name of the customer. Again, these are anonymized, so these are individuals are not real per se. They are different. All right. Okay. So I have those 2. Now I'm going to focus on this sheet here. The RFM analysis is based on taking the percentile of individuals and splitting them up into logical groups. I'm a small business and I only have, I think there's about 500 records here, 500 customers that I'm tracking on this sheet. It's relatively small. So I've decided that I'm only going to use a 1, 2, or a 3. You'll notice in my PowerPoint that I had a 1 through a 5. If you've got a lot of customers and a lot of orders, you want to rank them accordingly. So the larger base of customers you're looking at, you may want to go to 1 to 5. So you get a nice logical group of segments, right? I'm going to do 1 to 3 because I've got just a little bit of customers here, okay? Over on this side, what you're basically doing is you're determining where the cut score is for each of these factors, okay? There are some scary looking formulas in here, but I'm going to refer to just this first one. All right, you'll notice I have this cell selected, and it's a percentile. And that percentile is looking at the column that represents recency, which is C, and I'm looking to split it into the 33rd percentile. So I want to get the customers that are 33% and 66%. I'm splitting my list in 2. And then anything that's outside of that is a 3. So the ones that's, right, so, or I'm sorry, a 1 in this case, because recency is, you know, we want the most recent. They're going to get the 3s, okay? Let's do a case in point. Here's a 3 for us, right? So you'll notice that this individual, this customer, purchased on the 19th of June. And my formula is basically looking at today, and it's subtracting out, right? It's subtracting out today and going back to when they purchased and calculating how many days has it been. Well, it's been 41 days, all right? So that's relatively recent. That's under the 66. It's not below the 33, so they're gonna fall into a range that is on the high side, all right? It's on the high side. So percentile will break them out into that. So for each factor, you're doing that. So recency is calculated by looking at today minus when they purchased last, okay? Order frequency is just counting the number of orders. So if you remember customer number 1, he or she had 2 orders. So we know they placed 2 orders over the last 6 months. And when I say last 6 months, keep in mind that this is going from January 1st to June 30th. So over that 6-month period, that temporal plane, which by the way, was the time that elapsed, and unfortunately this particular business had to close up business. So this, you know, that's why we use June 30th, because they have to regroup. We'll just say they have to regroup. They're not sure where they're going right now. The total spend, obviously you're adding up all the money that they spent on orders, and you have that number. So customer ID number 1 is a 221. And you can see that it's calculated here. We have an if formula that looks at their recency score, okay? So we know that basically if they purchased recently, they're going to get a number. And we know that recency is going to be a 3 if it is within a particular group, right? Does everyone understand that? I'm hoping everyone gets that. It makes perfect sense to me, but sometimes when I'm explaining it, it comes out weird. So I just want to make sure that I'm explaining myself. And I'm trying to keep us within our time, because I'm cognizant that you all have things to do as well. So you don't want to spend too much time. So please ask questions if you get lost. Same thing with frequency. So frequency, and I'm going to jump down to this here, it's either going to be a 1 or a 2. So based on my data here, I've got 1s and 2s, and anything 2 or 3 or above is going to be outside of the ranking system. Remember, we split it into 2, technically 3, so it's n minus 1. So anyone that's outside of the ranking system will get, you know, the higher number. So let's pick on someone that on frequency. So here's someone that ordered 3 items. So are they a frequent flyer? Well, let's take a look. We go over to the F for this column, and yes, because we split it 1, 2, or anything after 2, since they're 3, they would be outside of the percentile, right? They kind of blow themselves out of the water. So they would get a 3. This person, however, on frequency, since they only ordered 1, they're going to get the lowest score, which is a 1. All right. A 2 would look very much like a 2. All right. The 6, however, is going to be a 3. So odds are you're going to see that a 4 is also going to be a 3. So if I come down here to a frequency of 4, that's going to be a 3. Why? Because the cut score was 2. So 3 and above is going to get a 3 automatically. I hope that makes sense. And again, keep in mind that if you have a 1 to 5 factor system for a larger group of orders, you're going to change your percentiles, okay? I hope that makes sense. So right now I'm working with just a split, 33, 66, and I'm working with that. But when you have a 1 to 5, you're going to have a third dynamic in there because you're splitting your ranks. If you're familiar with sports, it'll make perfect sense to you. Or if you're a professor and do grading, it'll make sense to you. But we'll always help you with any questions that you have. So I color-coded my RFM score only because it makes it easier for me to see when I'm doing filtering. I have this set up to do filtering. So for example, if I wanted to, and this is obviously Google Sheets, you could do the same in Excel. If I wanted to look for just the 333s, I could do that and filter and see just the 333s. Now, for some reason that didn't work. Not sure why. What can I say? We'll try the, here we go. Sometimes this happens when you bring it over from Excel into Google and for whatever reason, it just doesn't want to behave. There we go. We have a, keyboard error on the part of the driver here. What can I say? So here are all the 333s. So why is this important? So that we can narrow down our focus and we can take a look at the nature of the data that we're working with. Remember, the whole idea is you're using this data to make effective business decisions. All right. You literally could take this data and copy it out to another spreadsheet to work with. Maybe you want to give a list to the person that does your marketing and you want to treat the 333s a certain way based on how you have labeled them, right? So you could literally take this list, give it to the person that does the marketing, and they could do a constant contact. They could do, whatever it is that you do in your marketing scheme. All right. You could do the same for, the 111s. Let me get rid of that. And here we go. The 111s. Now I made them red. What can I say? But red is, it has to mean something. Now, if you look at the time frame, and again, it might be difficult for you to see, but you'll see that the 111s, if I were to then sort by date here, here we go. You'll notice that January, everyone knows that after the holidays, business is slow, right? So this kind of represents the pre-COVID period up until about this point. Then we get into here and then COVID really started to peak, right? So you'll see we get into February and that's when things started to ramp up with COVID. You get into March, you've got, a lot of red here is the point I'm trying to make, a lot less green because of COVID, all right? So at this point, your 111s did not place any more orders. May and June, these guys pretty much churned. You can assume that they've churned and you've kind of, I won't say that you've lost them, but this group you're going to treat differently. You're going to make decisions differently for this group relative to the 333s. So it would be important for you to know what do you know about this group? Look at their IDs. Look at the type of spending they did. You would go to the prior 6 months of the year. So you go back to 2019 data and profile them then and say, who were they then? And this is what they are now. What drove them to my organization? What was their behavior prior? And do a comparison and literally side by side and say, okay, we know that they preferred to purchase these types of things. This is who they were prior. We're going to market to them as they were prior, okay? And again, it involves a lot of trolling through the data and making those decisions accordingly, all right? So let me clear this and select all. The same thing for the yellow, I'm sure that you could get that. Let me just scroll down here and focus on these 3 here. So what would the strategy be? 333s are the most active, they buy often and spend a lot. So they're the ideal customer. You want to expand engagement with them, launching loyalty programs and so on, right? Make them feel valued. The 222s, they're least active. They may have bought, one time, they spend a little. So you want to think about how you can reach out to them and make them more consistent, increase their purchase behavior. Again, you're using data to make those determinations. And then of course the 111s, these may have churned, especially with COVID. So you want to be cognizant of who they were prior. If you just acquired them during COVID, obviously that has implications as well. So you can almost treat them like brand new and reach out to them, making the offerings, as you see fit, given what you're selling. Okay. Factor insights are listed here. Again, same thing. You want to understand what the factor means. So if you're looking at just ones and the recency, right? Focus on what that means. Same for the 2, same for the 3. And then the driving questions are, who are your best customers? Which ones contribute to your churn rate? Who has the potential to become more valuable? Which customers can be retained? There's a lot of businesses having that question. We know we've lost a lot of customers. Who can we retain? There are going to be some that we lose because of COVID, and that's just a fact that we have to face. And then, of course, which ones are most likely to respond to engagement? Things that you can do to spur engagement. Okay. So questions about this spreadsheet. Again, you're going to be getting a copy of this, and I do hope you find it helpful. Let's see, do we have any questions in the chat? We do not.
Well, I have a question.
Yes. Yes.
So people are going to be receiving this spreadsheet, but if they need help with it, is there a possibility that you would come back if we have like 3 or 4 people and people could actually workshop or ask specific questions about when they imported and what happened? Is that
Absolutely.
a possibility?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would love to assist. Keeping in mind that everyone has different systems that they work with, and the goal is to make this actionable for them. So most definitely, I would be more than willing. Sure.
And that also would apply for people who are watching this as a replay on Facebook, that they could, I think when you watch it as a replay on Facebook, that I think you don't have to register. So then they would need to post underneath on Facebook that they're interested, and then we can get back to them and include them in the next session.
Absolutely, because we did go, for time constraints, we went through this rather fast. And, if you've been doing this for a while, it's easy peasy, but, the whole goal is to understand that you don't need a lot of fancy software to do these types of analyses. Spreadsheets can be your best friend, especially if you're on a budget, or you're more familiar with spreadsheets, and everyone is learning at a different level. And so maybe this is something you didn't know about spreadsheets. So the goal is to give you some tools that will help you make decisions and gain insights from the data that you already have. And that's what's really important. That's what's driving this. This is data that you've already collected. So this is descriptive analytics, allowing you to use that data to see what happened and where do we go from here, and how do we make those decisions in a careful, data-driven way. So that's really what this is about.
It's really great. It's an awesome tool, especially if you're not really talented at creating formulas. Getting access to this spreadsheet sort of does all the heavy lifting for you. So the hardest part is really just importing your data into the spreadsheet, and then to actually ask a question afterwards also is tremendous support.
That's right. And if I can quickly interject, so basically what you're doing is you're copying your customer ID, your last order date, and your order frequency in. So I can help them with that process of getting that data in, which can be a little stressful, because you don't want to remove those formulas, right?
No.
Right.
No, and it always looks simple, and then you import your stuff and you're like, wait a second, I'm having this problem. And then you spend all of your time trying to problem solve, and then it doesn't feel so easy anymore.
Yes.
So
yes. Well, one rule of thumb, always make a copy of the spreadsheet, have a copy that you didn't touch, because things happen. So make a copy, keep it in your treasure trove. And this way, if you do have a little misstep or mishap, you have your copy, you have your backup. So.
Well, thank you so much, Cynthia.
Yes.
Thank you so much to everybody who participated by watching today. And just want to thank OpenHub for providing this, opening up this service and this information, and empowering Hudson Valley businesses to use data to their own advantage, and with very little training, it's really what a tech hub can do. So
Yes, yes.
yay!
Yay, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, well, it's 6:58.